Welcome to the Stumble Across podcast. This is the podcast where I basically stumble across people online and invite them on for a chat. Usually with me knowing very little about them, so this is completely unprepared, completely unfiltered, but this leads to uncovering some of the best stories. Now, in today's episode, I stumble across Boogie. Now, Boogie is a former prisoner from Texas who then, when he got out, decided to leave the gang life behind him and started up his own production company, making social media videos for small businesses. Boogie speaks very openly, actually, about joining a gang, his time with gang life, with his time in prison, and what he experienced while he was there. He also mentions about being within the podcast world as well, with setting up his own podcast. And I started by asking him just how he got into that podcast work.
Yeah, so actually, I had a podcast before. So I used to have a different podcast. It was called Wasting Our 20s. And it was just, I had just got out, podcast just started blowing up. And I started listening to the Joe Rogan Experience and a couple different like sports podcasts and stuff. And I was talking to my brother and I was like, man, how great would it be to just do a podcast? And he was like, I have everything to do a podcast. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, man, I thought about doing it. So I just bought the mics and, all this shit that I need to record
Mhm.
it. So do you want to do one? And I was like, sure. And so I did it. We had a great time. We had a blast. And he's like, tell you what. Oh, because I was like, oh, we're going to post it. And he's like, nah, I'll tell you what, let's do 10 episodes. If at the end of 10 episodes you still want to do it, we'll start publishing them. So we
Mhm.
did 10 episodes and I loved it. He loved it. So we just started kind of doing it before I started working like night shift and stuff. So I started out with me and my brother, and me and him just having natural, organic conversations, bitching about work and life, and it just kind of grew from there, man. And then next thing I know, my friend found my podcast, and he was like, "You do a podcast?" And I was like, "Well, not anymore because my schedule." And he was
Mhm.
like, "Well, you and me got the same schedule. Why don't we do one?" So me and him started doing a podcast together, just laughing about life, sports, dating, just stuff that goes on in our lives.
Because that's the thing about doing a podcast. You sit down, you record, you say it, and it's out there. That's it. There's well, not that there's nothing else to it, but I mean, it's a good way
Yeah.
of getting things off your chest and getting things out there.
Yeah, it's basically free therapy where,
Yeah,
even if nobody listens, I've already got it out there, man. The internet can hear it if they
yeah.
want to. And like, we do video also, so we're also on YouTube and stuff like that. But
Well, tell us a little bit about before we get to what you're currently doing. Then let's go back a little bit then and tell us a little bit about your story then.
all right, man. So let's start with I guess kind of where it all started.
Yeah.
So I was 11 years old. My parents got divorced, and I took it really hard. And all of us kids did. So it's me, my sister, and my two brothers. And I kind of didn't know what to do. So I sort of started acting out to where I was getting in trouble. I ended up joining a gang, committing various crimes here and there. And then when I was 17, I got caught for aggravated robbery, and I ended up serving 5 years in the Texas penal system. Made a couple friends, kind of just. I actually ended up having to do my whole five. I didn't make parole, so I did my whole 5 years, which in itself was crazy. But I got out. Like I said, I was working a bunch of odd jobs. There was a point where I was working three jobs to where I would literally go from one job, take an hour nap in my car, go to the next job, take an hour nap in my car. And I was like taking naps on my lunch breaks and stuff like that. And then I was like, you know what? I really don't like this anymore. And funny enough, my mom, she works with like big trucks and stuff. And I got my CDL and she helped get me into a company. Did that. So I started making better money. But then I was like, man, I don't want to kind of just be an employee for the rest of my life. So took that, sort of got some money, invested it into buying like a camera, professional equipment, and stuff like that. And I started Cement Block Productions, which is a production company where we make videos to kind of help small businesses grow their online presence. And it was just kind of for me being a goofy character my whole life, making people laugh, to where my boss was like, man, you're pretty funny. Would you make a video for the company I was working for at the time? And I was like, yeah, sure, man. I don't care. Like, I'm not camera shy. And that was actually my first customer. I made a video for my old company. They paid me for the video, and I had such a blast doing it that I was like, you know what? I think I could do this like for a living. And that's how I kind of just got my start, man.
Because that's the bit that everyone is kind of a bit wary of. You kind of taking that risk of of starting out by yourself? Because it's okay, you can just go all of your life and work under someone, but I guess making that jump is the risk taker, you know.
Yeah, it was definitely scary, especially because like I have a very good paying job, being a truck driver and stuff like that. So I was like, well, if it fails, I do have this to fall back on. But then I was like, you know what? I shouldn't talk like that because I'm not planning on failing. So then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to believe in myself. I think that I'm a charismatic guy, and I think I can talk to people very well. And if I don't tell anybody I've been in prison, they usually don't know, which is also pretty good. And I usually show up with long sleeves, so you can't see all the tattoos and stuff.
Do you mind if we talk about that time in prison?
Sure.
So
Oh, sure,
when you
man. Yeah, I
first,
don't mind.
I mean, when you first go through those doors, and I get, it's a not a life experience, but I mean, due to several things, snowball effects, and so on, you've ended up in that place. What is your first thought when you end up there?
Terrifying. Because one, I mean, I'm 17 years old, and then the way that they used to classify us now, they passed a law where they can't separate us. But before, we used to be separated by like the level of your crime. So because
Mhm.
mine was aggravated because I had an illegal firearm, they were like, "Oh, you're a dangerous person." So they gave me what's called a purple band. So I had to be with other purple banders, which is aggravated assaults, murderers, aggravated murder, capital murder, stuff like that. So I'm in there with some pretty hardcore people,
Yeah,
and I'm 17 years old. And the first day I walk in, this like big, like 6'5" black dude walks up to me because he wants my mattress, and so I get the shit kicked out of me and my mattress stolen for like my first 3 days, and it's definitely a shock because it's like, man, this is so crazy. And then at the time, I actually had a drug addiction. I was addicted to cocaine, so I weigh maybe like when they weighed me on my intake, I was 5'10" and I weighed a buck 10, so 110 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilos. I'm sorry, I should check that out. No, it's fairly small. I was like a toothpick. I was so tiny. I had like a bird chest. You know what I mean? I always used to joke my stomach was touching my back. It was terrible. You get two cold bologna sandwiches, and I don't know if you guys have like these little like oatmeal cream pies. You know what that
no,
is? It's like a cinnamon little pastry. So it's like a little
right?
cinnamon disc, basically with cream in the middle.
Uh-huh,
And you
uh-huh.
get two bologna sandwiches that are frozen so they can last longer. So you have a bologna sandwich, a piece of cheese, ice, and a piece of bread, all mashed together, smushed and wet from the ice melting, and then a small little sweet treat. And
And
that was
it's
my
just
intake into prison.
every day.
No. So after you get processed, that's processing. Which my processing, because I don't know why I was just like so nervous. I didn't want to
Mhm.
tell them my name, and I didn't want to like give them any information. And so if you come in on drugs, they have to separate you so you don't like in case you're coming off of a hard drug and it's like really bad. They have to separate you, and I'm refusing to tell them what drug I took because I think I'm gonna get in more trouble. So I'm like, I haven't taken anything. I don't know what you're talking about. They're like, your pupils are super dilated. We know that you're high, and I was like, I'm not. Y'all are crazy. Whatever. And they're like, we're gonna separate you for 2 days, and then we'll see if you change your story. So I'm in solitary confinement for 2 days, coming down by myself eating these bologna sandwiches, and then once you go to general population with all the other inmates, that's where you start getting like more respectable meals, I would call it.
Yeah, yeah. And anyone who's been through that experience, they always talk about like the first night when the door closes.
Yeah. Yeah, that first night when the door closed, so I was in an it's basically an open tank. So it's me and 27 other inmates in an enclosed environment. And also I was separated because of my age. So the tank I was put in, nobody's older than 25 years old. So it's kids basically from 17 to 25, just rough and rowdy. They literally stay up all night and then they sleep during the day. So when I first got processed into the tank, it was like 10 p.m. So I get processed there. Everybody's wide awake. Everybody's rowdy, fucking around. And like I said, I got beat up maybe within 5 minutes of me being there because I apparently my mattress was nicer than somebody else's, and he was like, "Give me your mattress," and I was like, "Well, no, this was mine. They gave it to me. Like you have your own mattress." And he's like, "I don't care. I want your mattress. Give me your mattress." And I was like, "No, I'm not just gonna." And then just got punched right in the face, like mid sentence, just pow, and then
And like
just
something
got
like that,
the
like that seems so small to us, but like I'm guessing that's a big thing in there. Like just something like that. That's that's a big part of your day.
Yo, you when you first get there, yeah, because people are kind of just trying to like test you because they kind
Hmm.
of want to see like. if you're gonna fight basically and defend yourself, or if you're gonna be so we call them peons because essentially they get pissed on is the term, the prison house term that we call them. They were called peons, and so
Mhm.
they want to see if you're basically a weenie and if they can take advantage of you. Because if you go in there and you don't fight, people tend to like extort you if they find out you have money. They take your money. Uh, they take the shoes off your feet. They'll take your clothes. They'll take your mattress. They'll take whatever they want because they know you're not going to fight for it. So maybe I think like my first, maybe like 3 weeks probably was just like that, where I was getting in a fight maybe like every other day. And then after that, it kind of calms down because then everybody's like, oh, that's Boogie. He's cool. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
And
all right.
you spent 5 years in there.
Yeah, I spent 5 years in there. So I spent 2 years in county jail fighting my case or whatever, and then when I got sentenced, my last 3 years, I got moved to like actual like the state prison. And when I moved over there, that's also different. But by then, like I said, I already been locked up 2 years, so I'm just kind of used to the jailhouse environment. So I get in, I walk there, but it's actually a lot more calm in state prison because people are trying to make parole. They want to go home early, so they're like on better behavior. Whereas in county, you literally have nothing to lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So everybody's just rough and tumble.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing, when you were there, I get there's people who that's their life. They're in prison, they're out of prison, they're in prison. I guess your thought was just, I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah, I was like, I never want to be here again. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy the recidivism rate because like so apparently within the first 5 years of you being in prison, you have like a 50% chance of returning, and like within the first year, your chances of return are like 80%. I think is what the statistics say. So you have
Mhm.
like a very high chance of coming back. So yeah, it's we call it a revolving door because you see somebody and then literally months later you'll see them down the hallway in a different tank and you're like, that's crazy, you just came back. I know somebody, they bonded out, got out of jail, committed six more crimes, and then was back in like 2 months. And I was like, this is insane. Why would you want to come back here?
Mhm. Mhm.
And just, yeah, I got out and I was like, I'm never going back to prison again. And luckily, I've been out now since 2017 in August. I've been out, what is that, 6 years now? Something like that? Seven? Oh,
And
I'm,
that gave you the boost then to kind of think, right, that's it. I'm gonna go and start my own business. I'm gonna get things rolling and get back on the wagon, I suppose.
yeah, basically, because I was like, you know what? I'm getting out. I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm kind of
Mhm.
done with this part of my life. Because really, what opened my eyes was, like I said, I when I went to prison, I was part of a gang, and the gang that I was rolling with is predominantly a I would say black gang. And in prison, it's more about like the color of your skin, more so than like outside stuff. So when I got there, I remember I got into a fight and I got separated. They moved me somewhere else, but they left all my stuff there. And then when they brought me my bag, I was missing everything. And I was like, what happened to all my stuff? And so I went to rec, which is like recreational time or whatever in the yard. And I asked somebody that I knew, I was like, hey, what happened to all my stuff? And they were like, oh, all your guys took it. And I was like, what guys? And they're like, oh, the guys who you were like part of a gang with, they took all of it because they said you'd be cool with it because it's for the cause or whatever. So after that, I was like, you know what? I'm done with this shit. And when I get out, I'm going to like take care of the situation and just be done with it. So then I got out. I went to my former, for lack of a better term, gang leader, and I was like, "Hey, I'm done with this stuff." We took the proper measures of getting me out, and then I
Because
just was
how
like,
does that
"Well,"
how does that come about in the first place? Is it just somewhere that you grew up and that something you just fell into? Like,
yeah. So I grew up. I don't want to say poverty because we did okay, but the
mm,
neighborhood that I grew up in, yeah, it was like gang infested, and it's like it was a pretty bad neighborhood when I was first growing up, and there's gangs just kind of all over the neighborhood. So yeah, just a couple of me and my friends, we just sort of joined a gang and linked up.
and tattoos are a big thing.
Yeah, tattoos are a huge thing, especially for me because I've always loved like tattoos and stuff. I was a big like art nerd. Like I love drawing and stuff like that. So I
Mhm.
drew like a lot of my tattoos. So like I said, I got like all this stuff right here, like my whole chest, my stomach, the inside of both of my biceps. Out here, I got this one. I got my back done, and I got some on my legs. I got all of this in prison. I got this all, and
Uh,
it's crazy when I tell people because I got all of this for like $50. Basically,
Wow.
would be the equivalent to what I paid. Yeah, and everybody's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"That's crazy! You only paid $50," and I'm like, "That was also in jail." You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
normally
that's
this
right.
will run you a couple thousand.
And when you go to this leader then, What is that type of conversation like? I'm sure it's not an easy one.
No, yeah, it was hard because it was a big part of my life, and a lot of those guys I thought were my friends and stuff like that, and I did make a general connection, and then trauma kind of tends to unite people. So I was in some pretty traumatic situations with a couple of those guys. So it was kind of hard, but I was like, you know what? I need to make the decision right now. Like, if I'm going to change my life, I need to change it all the way. And I can't be associating with the same type of people because if I do, like, I'm never going to get out of this shit. And so that kind of was just, it was hard, but the conversation had to be had. And he was actually really cool about it because, he's actually in a wheelchair from and we'll call it an accident from an accident that happened. And he was like, "Listen, man, like I'm proud of you. I hope you're all right, and I hope I never see you again. You gonna do big things. You're gonna be okay. You're a smart kid." And so he was nothing but supportive.
Because I mean, yeah, if you're saying there about like being a wheelchair, and so that kind of highlights that there are people taking their life into their hands just for this.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I said, there's a you understand when you join, you kind of I hate to say the word forfeit, but you sort of forfeit your life for a greater cause, sort of. You know what I mean? Where it's like you're no longer one, you're many, and you're kind of essentially disposable. Honestly, you know what I mean? Because there's somebody right there to take your place. It's just a shapeless, nameless face at the end of the day, and you kind of realize like this is not really worth it. I have a family that loves me and cares for me, and I
Mhm.
want to grow old and have the function of my legs when I get older.
And I guess like when you're in something like that, none of those things, like family, friends, none of that kind of comes into your mind when you're in the middle of it all.
So I had to like completely separate myself. Like I literally like would never see my family. Like I left home and stuff like that when I was 16. I left home and I stopped living with my parents, and I just kind of was living with my friends and living in party houses and stuff like that because like I said, I'm the oldest, so I have a bunch of younger siblings, and I never wanted them to be exposed to that kind of life because I was like I don't want them to be like me. So I never really brought that kind of stuff around. Like they know that I've done stuff from stories or like they meet people that I know and they'll tell them stories about me and stuff. But luckily, they've like never seen anything. You know what I mean? Which
Yeah,
I thank God for.
yeah, yeah. So when you kind of wrap that part of your life up, the next step was to get the production company. Where has this taken you then so far?
So far, like I said, it's taken me to pretty good places. We've helped a couple companies out and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Like I said, I ended up buying a professional camera, some sound equipment, and stuff like that. And the good thing is, most of the time, especially for smaller companies, a lot of the employees don't want to be on video. So, like, I'll just go in, I'll put on whatever company shirt they want me to. I'll wear the company shirt. I write a basic script out, and then I kind of just talk to the owner of the company, and they give me notes about specific things that they want mentioned or said. So I do that stuff, and then we just kind of go from there. And my former podcast co-host, he was also helped me start the business. So he would be behind the camera, and I would just do everything in front, where I would do all the talking and stuff like that.
Because let's be honest, like in 2023, you can't really run a business without being online, without being social media, without doing the videos. So yeah, and I can't imagine a business not doing that.
Yeah, and it was tough for me, especially because I went to prison at like the height of like social media and stuff. So when I went to prison, Facebook just came out.
Right.
Facebook just came out, and Vine was still alive and well. That'll let you know around the time I went to prison in 2011. So there
Mhm.
wasn't like a lot of stuff out there yet where social media wasn't like a necessity. It was still like a fun thing. It
Mhm.
wasn't a necessity for a business. And then I came out and I kind of just had to learn this stuff on my own because I'm kind of a prideful person, so I didn't really want to ask anybody for help. So it was just kind of me playing around with Instagram, TikTok, stuff like that, just playing around with it and sort of uh, reaching out first with word of mouth. And then once I got like actual videos and I was able to put them on my Instagram and put them on TikTok and put them out on the internet, it really was able to help me out a lot and grow.
Mhm. And I don't mean to keep going back to the whole prison aspect, but how accessible is like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram when you're in prison?
Not acceptable at all. It's not accessible in the state legally. But if you go to like federal prison, they do have a computer access and stuff like that. And then in prison, we sometimes get access to cell phones. We're not supposed to, but we do. And some people will have like social media accounts, which I always thought was crazy because if they catch you, you're like in a lot
Mhm.
of fucking trouble.
Yeah.
But
'Cause that's the
some
one thing that
people
always
think it's a
surprised
slip
me. Because
up.
I mean, over here in the UK, it's just the concept of prison is you go in and it's almost an easy life for some because some people are very, very smart of how to get things in, of how to do things on like, there's people who have been, like, streaming live on Facebook and they've been in a prison cell.
Oh yeah, man. There's like group photos from prison and stuff like that. Like it's crazy the stuff we can get access to. Some guys they're charismatic and they tend to like, they'll seduce a female guard or something like that, and then you got other people that like they'll have a family member that's related, but they don't have the same last name. So sometimes you kind of use your ties. Also, these are regular people sometimes, and if you're close to home, these people tend to be from your home city. So you get to talking, and it turns out you know some of the same people and stuff like that, and then it's we call it like finesse pimping. You kind of finesse pimp a couple of like extra things. Like for me, allegedly, I was selling tobacco and cigarettes and marijuana and stuff like that while I was in prison, and I was
Yeah.
also like making alcohol in my toilet relatively easily. Like in Texas, they don't pay you for your labor, so like you have to get a job most of the time unless you're like ill or something like that. You get a job, and like so for me, right? I was working in the kitchen, so the kitchen we have access to all the food. So I would get extra food and I would sneak it back to my dormitory, and then me and my friends would split it up and we would sell it for like commissary items, which is money and stuff like that. And then we would use that to buy other things. So like I would use that money to buy commissary items to make alcohol. And then I would make alcohol, sell those in bottles, and then I would use that money to buy cigarettes, sell the cigarettes, keep a couple for myself because as you can tell, I like tobacco, and keep a couple cigarettes for myself, sell off the rest of them, use that money to buy weed, sell all that, and then the rest is just it's just profit off of everything.
And that's what I mean by people being smart. Because I mean, that that is your business mind kicking in. That's your business mind working.
Yeah, entrepreneur forever.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember actually. I remember I was an entrepreneur when I was 12 or like yeah, I think I was like 12 years old, and I went around the neighborhood asking to mow yards, and I was making money, but it was just me getting my dad's lawnmower, and I would have to pay for the gas, and I would have to walk with the lawnmower down the street, and then a couple of my friends saw that I was making money, and they're like, "Oh, I want to do it too." So I was like, oh, I don't have to fucking work. I could just make them do the work. I set
Yeah.
up everything and then I
Mhm.
just get the money and I don't tell them how much I'm making. So like essentially I was getting like 15 bucks to do the front yard and 20 bucks to do the backyard. And then I would do the whole thing for 30. You know what I mean? If somebody wanted the whole thing done, I'd do it
Yeah.
for 30 bucks.
Mhm.
So I would go, I'd offer my services. I said, hey, we'll mow yard, 30 bucks. We're trying to raise money for made up event that I have made up, like a baseball team or something.
Mhm.
And so they would be like, yeah, that's perfect. Can you do it on, let's say, Wednesday? And I'm like, perfect. So I get like 20 yards and it's me and five of my friends. So I would divide them up between them and I would tell them, yeah, guys, we're making 20 bucks off a yard. So I'm going to give you 15. I'm going to get five just for setting it up, them not knowing I'm pocketing 10, so they're making 15. I'm making 15 off every
Yeah.
yard.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad said it all the time when he found out I started the business. He was like, well, you've always been business minded. He's like, I remember when you were a kid and you're doing that lawnmower business.
Because especially when you're that age, like it's obviously not something that you're taught at that age. It's just something that just kicks in. Some people just have it.
Yeah, it's just like it always came naturally to me. I don't know what it is. And then I've always been charismatic and stuff and easy to talk to. So I remember my uncle got a job at the Coca Cola factory, and he could get like free sodas and free energy drinks and stuff. And that's when
Mhm.
like Monster was the big thing. So I would tell
Yeah.
him to get me a case of Monster, which is like so when it's at the plant or whatever, it's a case of like 24. And so I wouldn't have any books in my backpack. It's just full of like energy drinks and soda, and
Yeah.
the vending machines charge like $3 for an energy drink. So I would sell them for two. And I'm like, hey, $2, I got an energy drinks. You know what I mean? And then I'd sell out and then I'd take that money. And then my uncle didn't want nothing for them because they were free for him. So he was like, yeah, sure, man, that we can make a little extra money. Cause I told him, I was like, oh, I'm charging $1 for an energy drink. So he's not even knowing how much money I'm making either.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, all profit. And then I would use that money to take, girls on dates and stuff like that.
Yeah, like, and these are the type of things they should be teaching in schools.
Yeah, no, seriously, man. I didn't learn shit in class. I hate to say that, but I
Mhm.
say that math is important. Other than that, I didn't really use shit else. Math
Yeah,
I
yeah,
use
yeah,
today, but other than that, I don't really use any of that shit. But
yeah,
I've always been
yeah.
like a big history buff and a big like math guy. But outside of those two classes, I hardly even went to my other classes.
You know, everyone dreams of doing a certain job and so on. Did you have a certain thing that you wanted to go on and do?
Funny enough, actually, when I was 17, I was actually talking to a recruiter for the military. I actually always wanted to go to the Marines because
Uh-huh.
I've always wanted to serve my country. I've always had like a lot of pride and stuff like that. And actually, I got more prideful of America when I got out of prison because then I realized I was like, man, I had all these freedoms stripped away from me. And now I realize what these freedoms actually mean. Like, you don't realize freedom of speech until you try to say something and someone yells at your face and says, shut the fuck up, inmate, and you realize you can't say what you want. And
Mhm.
it's so much different from a podcast where I can say whatever I want to now, and it's freedom of speech to talk about whatever you want to and stuff like that. Just, you're told what time to use the restroom, what time you're allowed to shower, what time you're allowed to eat. So it's like I just kind of appreciate the freedoms I have more. But I
Mhm.
actually always wanted to go to the military. I wanted to go to the Marines, and then I wanted to get out of the military, come home, and then I was like, I'll figure it out from there. But I just always knew I wanted to go to the Marine.
Mhm. And talking about, appreciating things, I guess in a way we can all relate to that in a wee bit, COVID lockdowns and so on, and what we've been told to stay at home and all of that. So it is the wee little things that I think a lot of people are starting to appreciate, whether or not that sticks, who knows.
Yeah, man, I can't remember who said it, but like I said, I love history, so I read just a bunch of historical books and stuff like that. And it was like back when like people were being oppressed, and like around the American Revolution time, and you don't realize the freedoms you have until they're encroached upon, and then you got to realize you have to stand up for those freedoms. And we saw that a lot, like you said, during COVID and all that stuff, where people were told you can't go outside, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then people were like, basically, I can do what I want. These are my freedoms that I'm gifted at being born, and I'm gonna do them however I want to.
Well, it's such an interesting story. I mean, hopefully the whole production thing kicks off as well. Can people? Do you have like a page that people can go to?
Yeah, you can always reach out to me on Instagram. I'm very active. If you comment on any YouTube videos, I'm very active on there. Like I said, I'll
Mhm.
respond to everybody and anybody. The Instagram is cement block underscore productions. So cement block, one word, spelled correctly. Cement block and then underscore productions. You reach out to me on Instagram, and like I said, I'm available for whatever. Especially now with the internet, if you want me to shoot something for you, just let me know. We can talk pricing, and I'll email it to you, or however we figure out the way that we can do it.
A massive thanks to Boogie for coming on to the podcast and, of course, for speaking so openly about everything that he did. And thanks to you for listening as well. Of course, this is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and all the other major podcast platforms, which you obviously know because you're listening. Don't forget to subscribe for the weekly updates and do leave a review and a rating. We do appreciate those, and that kind of helps to bump us up a little bit as well. Thanks so much. Until next time.